Dan Ives of Wedbush writing, there is some added nervousness on the important memory chip trade. We continue to believe that in this market, we will continue to go through a number of gut check moments. Dan Ives of Wedbush joins us now for more. Dan, good morning.
Great to be here.
Is this one of those gut check moments?
It is. Look, and I think you saw it with the Kospi down 10%. Look, the golden child of this tech boom. A lot of it's in Korea in terms of memory chips. When you think about what's happened with SK and obviously Samsung, and SK overtaking Samsung, Micron, such an important quarter relative to what we see in terms of demand, Ripple, what does that mean for NVIDIA, hyperscalers? But I continue, look, our checks in Taiwan, in Korea, no cracks in the armor. And that's why I just continue to believe third inning, one out, in terms of the AI game.
Further downstream, though, you're starting to see some pushback to price, increasingly. Does that upend some of the story?
Look, I think on the edges that could, but look, right now, demand supply, call it 12, 15 to 1. In terms of where we are relative to chips. So my view is like, you still, even if you had some events to even take some demand off, you don't have an equilibrium probably for another year and a half, 2 years, which in my view just continues to believe like the chip trade is what you continue to own. Look, hyperscalers, obviously right now those were kind of in the penalty box to some extent, but you will see some push against price. But it's our view, like over time, price comes down. It's all part of what we're seeing with tokens.
Profit margins, though, kind of a key point here, because profit margins have been just going to the moon. They've been incredibly robust at some of these semiconductors, in part because they can charge whatever they want. And that's changing. You are seeing some competition with Google and with Amazon coming into the fore. At what point do you start to see those margins really compress?
Look, I think right now, if there's a pressure point, you probably don't see that for another 9, 12 months. But just like you said, like competition's coming across the board. It's an arms race. You know, really, when you think from what Meta's doing to Amazon to Microsoft, you have software companies and now they'll start to produce chips. Look what's happening even on the Intel side with Apple. So that will definitely start to pressurize the situation. But in my view, it just continues to be like we are still so early relative to the build out. And that's also why you're going to have these gut check moments. You'll have these white knuckle periods. But we continue to view these as opportunities where you own the AI winners.
Well, the AI winners, though, is the key point here. How do you know who they are when they're shifting around so quickly? And I say this, I thought one of the most interesting stories was when Microsoft came out and they said that they were going to be using DeepSeek to lower the cost of deploying some of their large language models. I mean, is this indicating that cost is now a much higher factor on the list for a lot of these big tech companies when it comes to who they're going to go with?
Yeah, I think it's obviously technology, scale, but cost clearly plays in. There's also the models. Over time, the models are going to get cheaper and cheaper. I mean, the value, if you actually start to think about it, it's in the data, it's in the chips, less about the models, which is why ultimately Anthropic, OpenAI, they're so focused on enterprise, compute. They're focused on all these partnerships because essentially what's happening is everyone's building out their own moat or their own fort. And that's why it's a game of musical chairs, because eventually someone's left without a chair. Now, who are those losers? Look, that's our job, that's other people's job in terms of trying to understand who the winners are. Because you are starting to see a separation in terms of you can't just own the space. You can't just own, it speaks to our view. You have to be selective relative to owning the winners and making sure that you're not sitting owning a loser.
When it comes to enterprise, though, isn't Anthropic way ahead of OpenAI?
Look, I think Anthropic clearly, from a model perspective, I mean, it's their world, everyone's paying rent relative to what they've done, but that gap could be narrowed quickly. I mean, OpenAI is just not going to sit there on a treadmill. So OpenAI, they had their bullseye on their back, Anthropic, but you see what's happening with Anthropic, like in terms of going after talent from Google. It's this arm, because a lot of it is going to be, it's about the engineers. It's about compute power. And that's going to drive more and more debt raises, equity raises, and that will be also tests for the market in terms of how it handles it.
I haven't seen you since the president briefed me and a few reporters looking into, maybe doing something, public-private partnerships in these companies. What do you make of that, government taking a stake?
Look, I think it's selectively, it's important if it's done the right way. Because you could argue, if you think Intel, Intel now, I mean, they're obviously in a glorious situation. Look where they were a year and a half ago. If government doesn't take a stake there, which ultimately led to NVIDIA and more. Now you look at Lip and Intel, they're core in terms of the trade. When it comes to quantum, I think that's really important in terms of some of the government initiatives. And I think IBM and Arvin have been kind of front and center there because what's happening in China because of this arms race.
Can we finish on two losers, Meta, Microsoft? What do I do with those names now? They're in bear markets. Yeah. Everyone's getting all bulled up on the tech story. Two of the biggest tech names on the planet are in a bear market. Yeah. What do you do with those names now?
I think you have to separate them out. Microsoft, I think, is the most oversold large cap name. Just my view, have they made stumbles on Copilot and some other areas? Yeah, but in terms of enterprise, their backyard, Azure growth, compute, supply issues, I think that's ultimately a stock that, $550 stock. So I actually think that continues. Just like a year ago, the narrative on Google was so negative. Look where we are now. From Meta, look, it's a prove me. Right now, they're going up Mount Everest without, oxygen or whatever. What they're trying to do, that will be the prove it moment for Zuck as he ultimately tries to go and change the model. I think they're going to be successful doing it, but you can't just spend on Capex and not show any results.